Well, I am an academic. I'm a professor of sociology at the Institut Polytechnique de Paris, which is a big university here in Paris. And I basically travel the world with my colleagues and I solve mysteries too, which sounds like Scooby-Doo, but it's basically what we do. We do empirical research in several countries in relation with AI and how AI is produced. We are more interested in that aspect more than how AI is deployed, is used. And when I say we, is me and my colleagues at my research team, which is called DeepLab, which stands for Digital Platform Labor.
So you just published the book Waiting for Robots. It's about the automation of work, but also about the context of automating of labor. In this conversation, I really want to discuss with you first about the context about automation of labor. Then we're focusing on the gig economy. Then we're going to zoom in on data work, and in the end, we're going to find solutions or pathways for better or less work or less worse conditions for worker rights, but also for more broad AI. So maybe start with the automation of labor and a bit of context, because everybody's saying, okay, this is new, but in the end, when somebody say it's new, they are or lying or naive, but they can decide what they are. So can you give a bit more context about the history of automation of labor?
Sure. Well, automation has been around for a number of centuries, actually, because it's a long-standing effort for technologists and also economists to find labor-saving tools, labor-saving technologies. So if we look at the past centuries, all the push towards mechanization of manual labor that happened, especially around the Industrial Revolution, was a first wave of industrial automation. This is what is usually referred to as Industry 1.0. So it's the steam engine, it's the spinning jenny, applied to specific sectors, like, for instance, textile or transportation, but also they were, when compared to the machines we have today and the technologies we have today, a specific type of technologies. Again, they were using a lot of energy, and when compared to, ChatGPT, they were not intelligent. They didn't aspire to be intelligent. And this is the main difference when compared to the more recent history of automation, is that robotic aspect of it, the automation aspect of it in terms of, a machine that is able to lift a certain charge or a certain weight, is being supplemented with a new dimension, which is this machine is also supposed to be capable of reproducing human cognitive aspects. So we are now looking at an intelligent automation, and this is the main difference when it comes to the Industry 4.0, so the situation that we have today. Having said that, each wave of automation is always complemented by a certain discourse. In sociology, we call it accompanying discourse, meaning that we need a narrative to explain what's happening with technology. And so when it comes to the present day waves of technological innovations, each new big jump in artificial intelligence, for instance, it's always complemented by a certain narrative that now we are looking at what? Well, we're looking at, for instance, at the coming of artificial general intelligence. And this is something that has been thrown around a lot with ChatGPT. There is a problem behind these narratives. Usually there is a lot of, chest beating by the technologists, but not always the empirical reality is not always there to support that. So especially when it comes to artificial general intelligence, probably these promises have been overinflated for economic and financial reasons, because this technologists, engineers, designers, and data scientists are also trying to attract investors. So this is my way of saying that there's a lot of bullshit around each wave of innovation. And even more so with the intelligent technologies that we are facing today. Because, well, first of all, it is difficult to demonstrate that a technology is actually intelligent. Our own definition of intelligence shifts and moves around. It's a moving target. And this also explains why we have been seeing a lot of controversy around what these machines can actually do. And then there is also the fact that, in my opinion, we should have a hard look at the other term of the equation of the expression artificial intelligence and ask ourselves, is it really artificial? Is this technology really autonomous in the way it operates, or it demands a lot of human labor? And this is basically my research and scholarship over the last few years, to show to what extent our artificial technologies and artificially automated solutions are still largely done by hands. And these, of course, implies also questioning the very premise of these technologies, because these technologies, again, were initially designed to be labor saving. Are they really labor saving? Are we really working today in 2025 fewer hours, and do we have fewer people actually working? Well, the answer is unfortunately no. And I say unfortunately because well, work is not pleasure. It's work, and because this also implies certain risks in terms of worsening working conditions, worsening compensation, and in general worse protection of labor in general.
And if you look a bit more also to the context, but also to the history of automation for labor, you say, okay, it's a ever evolving with kind of waves, and on every wave we see the same predictions, wishful thinking, maybe fueled by curiosity or by greed. I think it depends per stakeholder, but still, because there are lots of academics or trend watchers or many people, investors, entrepreneurs who are really making predictions about, okay, this percent of jobs will be replaced by then. But in the end, you see, not so much is happening there. So can you maybe?
Yeah. Sure. Well, again, it's a long story, and economists in particular have been trying to assess the number of jobs that would be disrupted, displaced, or destroyed by these technologies for centuries. If we look back at the beginning of the 19th century, the early analysts of the Industrial Revolution were already very concerned, very worried, and we look, for instance, at, I don't know, David Ricardo, who is a giant in the classical political economy. Well, he was already saying in 1821 that some factors, like, for instance, global trade, well, basically it means offshoring of labor in other countries, or again, the tendency of the capitalists to employ machines instead of workers would disrupt the labor market. Well, what happened over the centuries was largely different. Of course, there is a shift in geography of labor, and also labor tends to move from one sector to the other. But over the last couple of centuries, we have seen that workers that, for instance, were employed in, I don't know, food production and agriculture moved progressively towards manufacturing, resilient than the service industry. But this does not mean that the number of people who work overall has diminished. On the contrary, we are now in a situation where never in the human history we have worked that much in terms of people employed or people working outside employment, which is another story, and then also in terms of hours worked. Having said that, more recently, around the 2013, 14, and 2024, another debate has revolved around actually measuring or predicting the percentage of work that would be destroyed, the jobs that would be destroyed by AI and robotics in particular. So this is closer to home, and this is also something that is remarkably stable in terms of prediction. It's around 47, in some cases 46% of the jobs that are predicted or anticipated to be destroyed, disrupted by AI, which is a lot. But unfortunately, these predictions unfortunately for the authors, these predictions have been questioned by several authors and institutions. OECD and ILO have produced alternative assessments that basically say, okay, you have clearly overinflated this estimate, and there is no reason to believe that automation will work like this. How does it work for these studies that anticipate, that predict that 47% of the jobs in 2030, that was the prediction, would be destroyed? We are almost there in 2030 at the moment we record this. The facts does not go in that direction. Again, we are not seeing, despite a climate crisis, two major geopolitical crises, and a pandemic crisis, a disruption of the job markets. On the contrary, again, as we record these, the numbers, the figures of employment are on the rise almost everywhere. What does it mean? Well, it means that probably there was a problem in the methodology employed for this kind of assessments and prediction, because and it is important to actually stress it, because the way economists calculate this kind of possible disruptions is indicative of the type of vision that they have of human labor. Basically what they do is they take a job description, and split it in several tasks. For instance, I don't know, I am an academic, I do some teaching, I do some, research, I go to meetings, and I reply to a lot of emails, and so on and so on. So you take all the tasks that make my work day or workload, and then ask yourself how many of these tasks can be automated. When a certain threshold is reached, for instance, if 60% of the tasks that make my profession, my trade, are automated, we consider that job lost. Now, this is not how it works. This is how it works, probably in an abstract way, in the mind of economists. But we know very well that in the actual world, in the real world, if 60% of my job is automated, my employer will find 60% more tasks for me to do of another type, which does not always spell as good news. And this is also one way of saying that we have been focusing a little too much on the quantity of jobs disrupted and not enough on the quality of the disruption on jobs that is introduced by automation. This is one way of addressing it and saying that probably we should take a step back when confronted with this kind of bombastic figures and ask ourselves, what are we talking about when we talk about automation? What kind of automation is it? What are the technologies that are actually at the center of these estimates? And why is it that basically automation never goes in a direction of actually destroying jobs, but creating new opportunities for even more work, again, for better or worse?
And and could it also be maybe also a different view on the definition of the work, and also in lots of regions in the world where maybe before the work wasn't visible, but now it's being done via online platforms. Mm-hmm. Now it's visible, but before people were working, but many people had no idea what was happening there. And now, because it can be measured, that it will also be taken into account.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is also one way of saying that probably we have missed the actual target. In my opinion, the main transformation of the last decades has not been around automation. It has been around platformization. And this is a point that I make again and again in the book, is the fact that platforms described and construed as hybrids between firms and markets are now relying heavily on algorithmic matching systems, putting in contact possible clients with possible workers and possible other, banking systems, logistic systems. They have to dovetail and link up with a lot of different actors. And in order to coordinate all these actors, they have to rely on a lot of data. Given the fact that they are sitting on these treasure troves of data, they become extremely interesting when you want to automate something, because the data is the fuel of present-day automation. What we call artificial intelligence is actually a lot of machine learning, and machine learning is basically, statistical learning based on data. You need to have the data. Who has the data? Well, Facebook has it. Well, Meta has it. Amazon has it. Google has it. This is why these big data production companies, platforms, have established themselves sitting firmly at the center of this market as also producers of AI solutions. Of course, this does not imply that they are immune to new, black horses like OpenAI that, became such a big company in a relative short time, but this market is basically an oligopolistic market, basically a market where you only have some very big players. These big players are basically data producers and traders, and what they do with this data is, develop algorithmic solutions and artificial intelligence, and this is the situation that we are facing now. What does it do in terms of labor? Well, it also creates a new situation where work is invisibilized or concealed, hidden if you prefer, because first of all these platforms use the facade of artificial intelligence to show again that they are very good at what they do. They automate everything. They're capable of working at scale and so on and so on. And again, this is their magic trick. Look, no hands in terms of no workers. Where are the workers? They are hidden behind this facade. They are in the back office. Also, because they are not always in the same location as those who buy these solutions. If I am, a company based in London and I want to automate a certain process, I can buy an automated solution developed, for instance, by, Meta, and I do not know how much labor it goes into, for instance, maintaining or making sure that the quality of this automated solution does not deteriorate over time. And I don't know how it was produced, how it was pre-trained. There's a lot to talk about training AI, I don't know all this. I don't know who are the people who are doing this job. I vaguely know that they have to do with the company from which I bought the solution. They vaguely have to do with OpenAI, Google. I don't know if they are employed. I don't know if they are freelancers or gig workers. I don't know where they are, and I don't know how much they are paid. All these are questions that, in my opinion, if you are an economic actor today, you should ask yourself. If you are a company, you should. If you're a government, you should. And if you are a customer too, as a simple user, I should ask myself, and tend to ask myself these questions each time I use any consumer automated solution. For instance, like ChatGPT or a chatbot of any other type, or a filter on Instagram, and so on and so on.
Yeah, interesting. So, what you'll say, so the gig economy, so the platformization of labor markets as a kind of new quote unquote intermediary between demand and supply. I think it's mostly also presented as a marketplace, but I would say that in many cases, especially for data workers, but also with delivery and taxi, I don't think the framing of marketplace is right. I think it's kind of more on demand buying and selling labor. So, which also implies that there should be employers. So about the data work we're talking about. So it's really a really broad phenomenon, because it's being paid, unpaid. This video being uploaded on YouTube is also a kind of data work. So we are also now unpaid data work in a kind.
Yeah.
But you are of course more focusing on the paid data workers or paid, and of course we're going to have discussion under what conditions. So the attention for data work is now growing slowly, but that could be also, of course, because of my own bubble. That's also, of course, possible. But you have the data work now. The World Bank reports 150 to 430 million data workers worldwide, which is a really broad, and see how you face that. That also needs some explanation. But I think it's in the end, it really shows, it's more than a model. It's not a magical box like the mechanical Turk, Amazon. Maybe Amazon is a really honest company, because they really used the word mechanical Turk in their no magic platform. It's about pre-training, post-training, but also impersonation of AI. Can you maybe before we start with discussion on the current data work and also the numbers by the World Bank, can you give us a bit more context about the history of data work? Because it isn't something that is of the last 2 years. You're already studying this for many years, but also before there was data work. So can you give a bit of historical context?
Okay, first, before I even go into the historical context of data work, let me explain that in the book I present the general geography, or if you want, the overall vision of what is digital labor and labor done on platforms, by saying that, first of all, there is the very visible phenomenon of the gig economy, gig work, and this is what I call on-demand labor. This is something that is visible, and everybody see Uber drivers or global delivery bikers and so on and so on. But they sit on a continuum with other forms of digital labor, and these two other forms are the data work per se, I call it micro work, and then also the socially networked labor, which is the data and and also the work that everybody produces on these platforms. To an extent, there is an argument to be made that even those who, reply on Recaptchas or who click I like on some social media are producing value for these companies. Having said that, the central point is that all these persons and all these users of platforms and all these workers produce data. Even Uber drivers produce data because they need to produce it, because otherwise the search price and the search price and algorithm wouldn't work. And this data is largely used to produce AI solutions. Okay. This is sometimes, or we tend increasingly to call it data work. So it's the work that is done around the data, on the data, to do what? Well, to improve them, to enrich them, to filter it, in general, prepare this data to be used to train AI, because the data constitute the examples on which the machine learning systems are taught. You need to show examples of a cat, millions, billions of examples of a cat, so that the, computer vision algorithm recognizes a cat. Right. And this also means that the persons who are recruited to do this data work are not, as one would imagine, data scientists or people with a very good salary and high recognition. On the contrary, they are people who, are recruited to just, look at a picture and say if it's a cat, which is something that on paper anybody can do. I insist on the fact that this is not true. Usually the people who are recruited to be data workers are extremely qualified, and this tends to be a skilled activity, occupation, a skilled labor, but they are paid as they are unskilled. And this is a long-standing tradition of hiring people to prepare data for some kind of technologies. I am presently writing a book on the long history of data work, and it dates back to the 17th century, when people started hiring. Usually, at the beginning, they were, people who could not access easily the labor market because they were discriminated, because they were, women, and they were not considered to be as good as their male counterparts by the people at the time, or because they came from specific backgrounds. And these people were hired to pre-calculate quantities that would be used to produce machines of certain types. At the time, again, they were, clocks or astronomical tools. Okay, this is the long history. If we look at how this long history materializes today, it's a long today. It started, around 20 years ago with a platform called Amazon Mechanical Turk. So again, it's Amazon behind it. It's Jeff Bezos. This was Jeff Bezos' baby at the time. We're talking about 2005 when it was launched. And at the beginning, it was just an internal platform developed by Jeff Bezos and his engineers to find people who would be able to improve the recommendation algorithm of Amazon, the marketplace. They were specifically tackling a problem called entity recognition, which means that you have a lot of double and triple entries in a marketplace. You have the same shoes or books that are classified in different ways. My book could be, waiting for robots or awaiting robots if there is a misspelling. So they had to recruit people to do this very tedious and repetitive job at looking at all the products and check if we were basically dealing with the same project, and then conflate the two. Right. This is long, tedious, and again, this was considered as not added value service. So they started hiring freelancers, people from outside the company. Why, waste the time of an employee that is well paid and you need to train them and so on and so on and so on. So let's just hire freelancers. Let's just hire people who are outside and pay them as little as possible. It turns out that people who are willing to work for as little as possible are people that already at the time were in dire situations. For instance, I don't know, people who could not access the labor market because they were long time unemployed persons, or people who were living in rural areas in India, Romania, Pakistan. These were countries that were providing the first data workers. And it turns out they still are. I mean, not specifically those countries, but basically still nowadays, 20 years afterwards, the company that is Amazon, but also all the other companies that went into this game of producing data and hiring and, recruiting data workers, are looking for those who are able to provide the cheapest labor possible. And so they look at countries that are in the majority world, and especially in low-income countries, like, I don't know, the two main countries that we have been studying, me and my team at Deep Lab, are Venezuela and Madagascar. So two of the poorest countries in the world, and especially in the case of Venezuela, a country that has been going through a very rough patch in terms of political disruption and geopolitical crisis and so on and so on. All these is important because around this large workforce, again, the World Bank tries to assess it. And does it by saying, basically, we do have two possible measures. Something is around 160 million. This is the more conservative estimate. And then we do have another methodology, and we are looking at considerably larger workforce of 435 million. I probably get them wrong, 1 million more or less, but the point is that you do have these two type of measures. I tend to be more on the conservative side, and I tend to insist on the fact that these estimates are important because they show something more than I don't think they are exact. I don't think that they are accurate, but they show a trend. And the trend is that the data workers, the number of data workers has been increasing over the last few years. Especially COVID was a major factor that influenced it. A lot of people started working from home, looking for new opportunities to find a supplementary income in some cases, or a main income in many cases. And working from home when possible, because you do have the equipment, you do have the connection, you do have the infrastructure, and you are also capable because you speak several languages, or you are more or less you have a certain level of digital literacy. Well, this allows you to access these international markets, which again do not work well for everybody. Some people are able to have what they would consider as a decent income, given the level and the cost of living of their country, but these are not good compensations. If we want to have some ideas, roughly, we encounter, especially in places like, I don't know, Kenya or again Madagascar, the income of the wage of people who are able to work continuously for, I don't know, 1 month would be around the equivalent $400 for Kenya. And if you go to Madagascar, it's way less, way smaller than that. It's around $120, the equivalent in the local currency, of course. This is something that is barely sufficient to survive, especially because these people tend to be in big cities like Nairobi or Tananarivo in Madagascar, but these are considered to be like, I don't know, 2 or 3 times the minimum wage of that country. again, if you look at other places and other assessment of how little these data workers earn, well, you have other estimates. For instance, a couple of Oxford economists assessed that the average compensation for a platform like Amazon Mechanical Turk is the median. Sorry, not the average. The median is $2 per hour, and this is definitely too little for anybody, and this also points towards a situation that is characterized by inequalities, exploitation of labor, undercompensation of labor, and also because we started this overview of data work by mentioning Amazon Mechanical Turk. It also points out how important these workers are in creating what we describe as automation. Amazon Mechanical Turk, the very name has nothing to do with the Amazon region in Brazil, of course, because it's Amazon, the company, but it has nothing to do with Turkey either. The reason why it's called Amazon Mechanical Turk is it references or pays homage, if you want, to an ancient robot. It's an 18th century automaton that was developed in Austria, at the imperial court of the Habsburg in Austria, and these mechanical Turk, the initial mechanical Turk of the 18th century was allegedly the first artificial intelligence, because it was a robot disguised as a Turk, as an Ottoman Turk. Thus the name, that was able to play chess. So play chess is an eminently intellectual endeavor. And this was supposed to be the first artificial intelligence because it was doing it as a robot. But it turns out that it was a hoax. Inside the robot, somebody was hiding. And who is this somebody? We don't know still nowadays. There are some hypotheses. And all these hypotheses basically have something in common, is that this person was not a grandmaster at chess. The person that was hiding inside the intelligence machine was not somebody who had domain knowledge, one would say today. And the same idea is the idea behind data work today. These people are hired not because they are good, I don't know, in electronics or music or whatever, I don't know, marketing, whatever the AI that they are training involves in terms of competencies. They are hired because they are ready to work for cheap. And then it turns out that they are also very educated persons, usually young persons. These are basically the profile, the social demographic profile that emerges from our own empirical research, that we are looking at people that are underpaid, not only because they are, well, objectively underpaid, but also because they are underpaid when compared to the level of competencies that they have, the skills they have. They are people who, in some cases, have master degrees or PhDs, and they are paid $2 per hour, or even less than that. In Kenya, it was like $1.34 per hour. Yeah, right. So we are looking at if you want a waste generation, worldwide destruction and disruption of the labor markets because platforms and companies have created this massive need for a massive workforce, and the bad news is also that this workforce is not destined to disappear anytime soon, or probably never if we go on producing AI the way we produce it now. Our AI needs a lot of data needs a lot of data work, and data workers are increasing. Why? Well, because it's not only a matter of training AI once and for all. This is something that is sometimes maintained by the very producers of AI, that when they are forced to admit that they hire data workers, they say, okay, yes, but this is a transitional period. We are hiring them now, or we hired them in the past because we needed to pre-train ChatGPT. The P in GPT means pre-trained. So it was trained in the past, but now it's trained, it's done. Well, this is not true, because once you have trained an AI, you need to retrain it, for instance, to learn new languages or to introduce new features, or, importantly, to make sure that it's working according to the requirements of your customer. If your customer wants, ChatGPT to avoid being a racist or a raging lunatic, to hallucinate, as sometimes they say, well, you need to retrain it to avoid biases, to avoid toxic content and so on. Or if your, client wants ChatGPT to be tailored to their specific domain of application, for instance, accounting or dentistry or whatever, and you want your chatbot to talk this, well, you need to retrain it. And then there is also the other question that sometimes these AI systems dysfunction, and you need to inject human labor, which could be described as maintenance in some cases. We describe it as impersonation. Sometimes you have people who are live workers producing data work in real time to make sure that your machine, your AI system, works according to what you have promised your investors or your clients. And this is another reason why it is difficult to get rid of this data work. And actually, I can believe that the number of data workers worldwide is increasing.
And do you think that data work and also the gap between the fortunates and the non-fortunates also makes the gap bigger between precarious workers and privileged workers, like you and me, I think?
Sure.
Because in the end, we can be more effective. Of course, we can discuss about that if you are, but we got opportunities to use the tools, while others don't. So, do you think it will also make the gap bigger between different working classes?
I think that there are two gaps. The gap you are pointing at is between the producers in the back office and, to an extent, the users in the front office situation. You and I, as users of these tools, and also even people who more or less work, in communication or also in technology-related fields, we are by and large the users of these solutions. And there is also another gap that, in my opinion, is even more important in terms of the kind of weight and the kind of consequences it has. It's the gap between the data workers who are, again, underpaid, overworked, and so on, and another category of tech workers who are, in the book I call them the exalted ones, are the workers whose skills and competencies are recognized. These are the engineers, these are the data workers, these are the people who, work for Google at the Google HQ in California. These are people who are paid millions of dollars per year to do the job of basically supervising the labor that is produced in the Philippines or Bangladesh or Kenya or Colombia, and they are on a continuum with their data workers, and this continuum deploys along supply chains. The people who are in the global south, in the majority world, produce data that is sent to data centers. These data centers are accessed by the Google engineers or the Meta engineers or OpenAI data scientists, and they train their models on the very data that are produced elsewhere. So this is basically another gap that, in my opinion, is extremely important. But it is true that both these gaps, the gaps between the users and the data workers, and the gap between the exalted ones, the exalted workers, the well-paid, well-recognized professionals, and the data workers, they point to the same gap. It's a gap between the north and the south of the planet, and the gap between privileged positions in places of privilege and underprivileged positions. And this is basically also the thing that allows us to say that we are still looking at forms of global dependency that are inherited from our colonial past and resonates with our colonial present, because colonialism is not something that happened in the past. It has been going on for 500 years if we look at, Latin America, and even longer in other parts of the world. And this is something that, again, allows us to say that sometimes the geography of data work overlaps with the geography of colonization. Again, look at Bangladesh, look at the role that India has had historically in producing data work, and to whom India has been selling this data work. Well, to English-speaking countries. The dependency between French-speaking countries and French producers of AI. Again, the fact that in places like South America, it's the US that is considered, beyond the linguistic aspect of it, the main buyer of, if you want, of the work that is provided by people in Argentina, Venezuela, Colombia, Chile, and so on and so on. So we are looking at specific geographies, forms of dependency, and in this global dependency patterns, we also see the manifestation, the presentation of the gaps that might exist between users and workers, or different categories of workers.
Yeah, I'm also really... So I really like to have discussions with tech optimists on LinkedIn, and also now with AI optimists on LinkedIn. And what I always think is interesting when new quote unquote technologies arise, and everybody talks about democratizing. They say, but this democratize. But I'm still say, okay, but in the end, that's nonsense. It gives maybe more people access to those tools, so everybody or more people can do that. But in the end, democratize. It's maybe when you have a really small lens of the world. And I think it's also the challenge I also see with the discussions and also the events also we organize with WageIndicator. When people are talking about the global, they're talking about Europe and North America, but they never talk about all the other beautiful continents in the world. So maybe many technologies they don't democratize, but they more are strengthening this more colonial history patterns. So which you also see when you look at how the data cables are built in the world. It's fascinating. It's also really sad, but also fascinating to see in how many dimensions you see this coming, and the same also here with data work and the demand and supply, which you also research a lot with your team. And what makes this development and debate different, or maybe more urgent than, let's say, 20 years ago? So what is now different? And can you also maybe talk about a bit more on the conditions, because the focus now was more on pay, so how much or how less they're being paid, but there are much more different aspects to talk about, which are read in your work.
Yeah, well, when compared to 20 years ago, or even more to 200 years ago, again, I said that this data work has a very long history. It's the scale that is impressive. The scale of the phenomenon today is, humongous when compared to 20 years ago. Even if we only focus on the number of companies and platforms that are on this market, we have seen that now, big actors. I don't know. I can mention a few, but they probably are not famous outside the small circle of people who study them. I don't know. There is, for instance, one of the giants is called Appen. It's an Australian platform. Another one is now called Outlier. That basically is connected to another one that is called Scale AI. It's the one that basically produced ChatGPT. So these are the companies that are behind the big landmark technologies of the last few years. And again, the scary part is the scale of the phenomenon, the number of workers that they can leverage. Of course, this is something that also has to do with the competition that they create among workers, which drives the wages even further down, which is very simple to understand. If platforms operate to an extent as markets, is because they, publish a task and they say who is ready to perform this task and for how little. So there is some kind of rat race that starts between workers. If more workers are present on the platforms, people will be ready to perform a certain task or micro task, because this tasks really sometimes concern, look at 10 pictures and tag them. This takes less than a minute, right? So the prices are driven down, the wages are driven down, the income is driven down, and this is something that has to do with the scale. If these companies are bigger, they have a larger workers pool, and this workers pool means that they can pay less and less these workers, which leads us also to say that there is little difference in some cases between a task that is performed in less than a minute and is paid a few cents, or in some cases even less than a cent, because we have observed tasks that are paid really 0.001 dollar. Between a task that is so small and so poorly paid, and a task that is so small and not paid at all. And this brings us also to the final family of digital labor I describe in this book, Waiting for Robots, is the social network labor. Is the fact that to an extent an increasing number of data workers are not even aware of being themselves producers of data and of work. The example that is often used, because it's been around for 20 years now, is the Recaptcha. Recaptcha is a system that on screen pops up whenever you, have to retrieve a password or leave a comment or whatever you need, and you have to show
you're
that
human.
you're human, that you're not a robot.
So
why?
So the robot asks, "Are you human?" And
yes, exactly. Which is paradoxical in itself, but it's not only paradoxical; it's hypocritical, because actually the task of reading a text or recognizing images already has been tried with a robot, and the robot was not able to do it. So insofar as the robot is not able to do it, the underlying logic is, well, let's outsource this to a human being, and this human being will be able to do what the robot didn't, right? When I say outsource, it's I chose this word because in some cases Recaptcha work is paid for. There are big platforms like Captcha or Quality Bubble. Again, they are not known outside the inner circle, but they are captcha factories. You go there and you pay people to perform a captcha. What's the difference between this person who is paid a cent or less than a cent to crack a captcha and myself, who I'm paid zero to do it? On the contrary, I am promised that I am accessing this service and I should only be grateful. Well, this is the starting point for a larger conversation that has to do with basically data extraction and data work extraction from larger population. To an extent, again, this is an argument that has been made for a few decades already. To an extent, users are producers, so producers and users, and because they are producers, they are mainly and also workers. Of course, this is not the same. This is not the same in terms of these. Your contract. Even though the vast majority of the data workers do not have a standard employment contract either. This has not to do in terms of the kind of even the effort that one deploys. One is not forced to perform a captcha or to leave a like, but these two helps train algorithm, recommendation systems, and AI systems. Now, 2025, Google and Meta are clearly stating that they are using whatever we say and do and click on their services to train their AI. And even if you opt out, it will not entirely
too late.
No, this is not only too late because it's happened in the past, but it's going to continue happening because this has been going on for, again, decades. Look at Google, for instance. The very way the search engine, Google's search engine works is harvesting data from users. If I type in enough times, a certain word, Google will learn this word and be able to anticipate next time I type it in. And if I repeat it for millions and billions of users, this creates the kind of situation where we type in, the name of a certain celebrity, and Google is able to anticipate what we are looking for without we even spelling it out, or sometimes even to correct it. Well, this has been going on for years. This is basically the focal point of the way these platforms work. And importantly, this is also the focal point of the way these profits are made. These companies prosper. They prosper by extracting labor. Sometimes they paid it very little. Sometimes they don't pay it. And this is a larger conversation that we need to have in the next few years, I think.
Yeah, and I think people also, so the end users also need to be more aware on this. I also read an article about Pokemon. So you need to make pictures, and they're using these pictures also to train self-driving cars and say, okay, we got a statue there, and the Pokemon's now at the right side make a picture, and on the left side make a picture, so they can make 3D models about that, which is, from a technical perspective, fascinating, of course, but there's lots of more ethical questions about it. And I think what you also mentioned is also the growing power imbalance between the companies, the ever-growing companies and individuals. And also when companies like Uber and Airbnb started, and I started also interviewing them and also having research, then everybody was saying, okay, so they are operating in fragmented markets, both on supply and demand sides. So they are the new middlemen, the marketplace, and they can create transparency. But in the end, having all the data doesn't mean that you create transparency, especially because your business model is only about creating more information asymmetry, which I also learn when I talk to Uber drivers to say, okay, now I am less informed than I was before Uber.
Yeah, and to be frank, I already at the time I had a few problems with that kind of explanation. First of all, because this company fragmented the market, then they described as fragmented because they, broke existing, corporations or oligopoly. Admittedly, it was not always a good situation, for instance, for taxi or for other transportation systems. But the other point is that, yes, they did collect the data, and for a certain limited window of time, they made it available to, I don't know, companies and regulators and so on and so on. But the main business drive that they had subsequently pushed them to basically internalize this data and only provide them for people who want to pay for it. So this was not, it didn't go as advertised, let's say.
No, I think many people were quite naive in that time, not thinking about the interests of the business itself and their shareholders, which are their most important stakeholder to focus on. Mm-hmm. And now the last part to solutions. So what can we do? You also described some different approaches on that. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. The final chapter of the book is
hope. Give us some hope.
Yeah. The tongue-in-cheek title of the final chapter of the book is "What is to be done," which is a reference to Vladimir Lenin. It's not because I'm a Leninist, but because I consider that the solutions are eminently political, and they do have to take into account a general overview of what's going on. They cannot be sectorial. They cannot be solutions that only, improve the situation, of Uber drivers. They need to take all these workers, the millions of them scattered all around the world, into consideration, because either we improve the situation for everybody or it doesn't work. It doesn't work for anybody, actually. And basically the solutions that I point out are of three types. There is a macro solution, which has to do with regulation and which has to do with implementing existing laws. Sometimes it's as simple as that. A lot of these revolves around already ongoing experiences of requalification of these workers as employees. And this has been going on in some countries. Look, for instance, at Spain, and the rider law that they specifically tailored on a sector and on a specific role, the role of the delivery workers, right? On bikes specifically. So it's really a niche, one might say, piece of legislation, but it is important because it points out a direction that was subsequently followed in 2024 at the European level when the Platform Work Directive was adopted. And basically the idea was the lesson learned with the Spanish rider law can be applied to other platform workers, possibly to anybody in the logistic and transportation system, but also outside that. And there are a number of possibilities once these laws this directive is transposed into law in different countries to also apply it to other types of platform workers. Again, like, for instance, people who work from Amazon Mechanical Turk, or people who work in specific AI-related industries, right? Now, this is fine, but it doesn't go beyond a one country approach. And I think that my team and I and my colleagues in other institutions and universities have enough data to show that this solution cannot be topical, cannot be limited to one country. We need to consider this as something that takes place along global supply chains, and we have to cure the supply chains because they are now poisoned by this kind of situation and this kind of dependencies and exploitation and so on and so on. So there is something to be done around corporate responsibility and due diligence all along the supply chains. And there is another promising European directive, which is the Corporate Responsibility Directive, which was adopted last year again, which can be leveraged in that sense. Let's see what happens. Now, this is the the first type of approach. I have two other approaches. The first one is another ongoing effort to create worker-led cooperatives that take a platform shape. And this is the platform cooperativism movement, which has been going on for 10 years, more than that actually. And it's an interesting perspective, in my opinion, which is more meso, let's say, looks at specific platforms and how users and workers of that platform can come together to actually own the tools of their own trade, right? And in some cases coming up with alternatives to the predatory platforms. Again, interesting. Potentially, these can be deployed globally because a platform is not specifically connected to one place. Of course, there are some local platforms. I don't know if you need to do, a delivery platform, you have to be based in a certain country, in some cases, regions and specific cities. But if we look at, Amazon Mechanical Turk, this is not a single nation or a single country platform. And if we were to imagine an Amazon Mechanical Turk of the people, of the workers, like people already started doing a few years ago already, well, these is not specifically limited to one country. So we could look at an entirely different situation. Then there is a third perspective, which I present in the book, which is more, let's say, utopian in nature. It's a moonshot, if you want, and it has to do with basically two things. The first is establishing a global redistribution system. Basically, my perspective is unsurprisingly, given the kind of phase that I have and the kind of work that I do. Again, I'm an academic, and I basically insist on let's levy taxes on corporations, on AI and tech sector giants, and use this to fund and pay for heavy redistribution of this profit to the citizens of the different countries that are concerned with this kind of value extraction mechanism. In my opinion, the best policy, the best policy measure that could work could be that of universal basic income, which is not the same universal basic income that people like Zuckerberg or Musk eventually like to gargle with sometimes, because their idea is completely, it's not my idea at all. I don't share any of their political position, but I don't share specifically their technological vision. Their idea is that robots are coming for jobs. I don't believe this. I believe that robots will have always been working with workers. So we have to find the right balance. And secondly, because people are going to lose their jobs, we're going to provide them with some form of income, because otherwise they cannot consume and they cannot buy our crap. Again, I don't share any of these premises. I think that work will go on. Work is going on, and to an extent, there is an argument to be made that never in the history of human beings we have been working that much in terms of hours produced, in terms of people put into work. And this is why we need to come up with a redistribution which is global in nature, because potentially everybody is involved in the state of production, to the extent that almost everybody has some kind of electronic device or smartphone in their pocket, and they are thus producing geolocation data, participation data, usage data, logs, and so on and so on and so on. So this is why I think that this should not be a wage. This redistribution should not take the place of the form of a wage or of a subsidy. It should take the form of universal basic income.
And also maybe some more practical, short-term solutions or pathways. Let's say there's lots of debate about responsible AI. And a new hobby of mine is when people are talking about responsible AI on LinkedIn to say, hey, what about the data workers?
Yeah. But I mean, to an extent, one might say that the general framework of responsible AI is predisposed to take into account also issues like data work. Why not? If you want to consider that your AI product is produced according to certain rules and norms of responsibility, one might say you should include that the data workers are properly recognized and paid for, and so on and so on. Would this be sufficient? In the short term, yes, probably. Already, if we established some general rules, like, for instance, people who work together on the production of the same AI solution should not be massively unequally paid. Consider for these all the people that were involved in the production of, I don't know, ChatGPT, from the engineers to the data workers, or the other way around, from the data workers to the engineer. An engineer that is paid $1 million or $2 million per year, and a data worker that makes a meager $200, $400 per month. What can we do, for instance, if we want to make a more responsible AI, to have a wage differential that is less pronounced than this, that smaller than this? What if we just imposed a certain salary cap for the engineers, or established that there should be a coefficient that does not go beyond a certain quota? This could be one way of being serious about responsible AI. Otherwise, in many cases, responsible AI or ethical AI is just one way of saying, my AI can be sold to anybody, but I'm not saying anything in terms of the way it is produced. I'm not telling you how the sausage is made, and the sausage is made with, rotten meat and a lot of exploited workers.
Yeah. I always compared about it. Just imagine going to a conference for better working conditions I always frame it. Let's say, okay, let's go to a conference for a fair textile industry, and don't talk about the producers.
Yeah.
It's also a bit.
But even if you just look at users, again, users and producers are all part of a larger society. A responsible AI or ethical AI should not be about defending only the reputation of the companies who produce AI. They should be about defending the society against the worst practices of the worst actors in a specific industry, and possibly also putting in place best practices from this point of view. So there is hope, even though I'm not betting on the horse of responsible AI. Personally, I think that in many cases this discourse about responsible AI is one way of avoiding more stringent regulations that sometimes could be even more effective.
I think the best strategy would be don't bet on one horse. Just bet on none, because I don't think one angle could bring the solution.
Try to ride several horses, which is physically difficult, let's say.
Multi-horsing, let's say. And what do you think of the last questions? And is there also a role from WageIndicator where we can play in this? So we are looking to, of course, the living wages all over the world, but also now the living tariff, which is for freelancers. So do you also see a role how we can contributes as one of the horses in the race?
There are several initiatives that are grassroots initiatives that, in my opinion, are extremely interesting. I tend to put WageIndicator and, for instance, the Fair Work project more or less on the same type of horse. I consider them to be the same kind of horse, if we continue with this equine metaphor, because they tend to establish standards in terms of compensation or in terms of working conditions, and each one, of course, is focusing on their specific domain of competency. I consider them to be on the same level because they work on what would be the minimum we should make sure that workers have. And unfortunately, we are in a situation where these kind of initiatives are really needed, because we are way way under the minimum wage or the minimum respect of, union freedom or working conditions or, in some cases, health and safety standards for these workers. A multifaceted approach that looks at compensation, but also looks at job quality is, in my opinion, the best way to go. There is a lot of, for instance, also very interesting work that is done at European level by unions like the ETUI for job quality, and I think that this is something that should be taken into account with the more let's say wage focused approach that you adopt.
Okay, perfect. So thank you very much for the interview.
Thank you for having me here.